Hi, my name is Kyle, and today I'll be giving a demo of the Keenly platform here. So we're going to start with the dashboard, the shortcut on the bottom left-hand side of the page. And for this person, we see the current status graphic using polar bears. The current status graphic using polar bears is indicative of the situation that's going on in the room. So here we see the bed and no one is in the bed. So in this individual's actual room, they're not in bed. Then additionally, we would see if they're sleeping. We'd see Z's coming out of the polar bear, and we can see what we call a secondary presence with the other polar bear standing in the room. That means right now no one is in the bed, but somebody is in the room, moving around in the room. And we can see that this is as of 1 minute ago. Going down a little bit, we can see the 24-hour overview. So we can see that the latest respiratory rate was 17 breaths per minute. The sleep last night was 14 hours and 8 minutes, and that there were 34 bed exits. So this is likely someone that's just getting in and out of bed probably all day. So now we can click the See More button or the Data button on the lower menu. So I'll go ahead and hit See More. We're going to load this data, and now we start with the respiration rate graph. So on this graph we can see two things. One is bed presence. So we can see all of these gray boxes across the graph is in instances where this individual is out of bed for an extended period of time. And then everything in green here, all the dots on the graph, are instances where we're measuring the respiration rate. The green square rectangle across the middle here also shows the normal range for respiration rate, and that's determined by the thresholds that we'll see later in the demo. Going to the top, we can also filter and see a larger or smaller amount of time. If we want to see 3 or 7 days, we can view that, so we really start to get to see a snapshot of the trends. And then if we want to go back further, then we can specify a custom date range and time range. Putting that away and going down more on the data page, we see the sleep section. So this is where we can see where people are sleeping, where they're awake, and the times associated with that. So again, this individual is likely a bit higher acuity, and is just spending a long time sleeping in their bed throughout the day. Here we see all the individual bed exits. We can look at secondary presence as well, so we're seeing that someone is in the room most of the time. And then now looking at trends. This trend section looks at the information over a 7-day period. So first we have respiratory rate. What we see with respiratory rate is really we want to see changes over time, and if we do see changes over time, specifically the number going higher, that's when we'd be worried. So this person's normal respiratory rate seems to be 16, 17, even up to 19 breaths per minute, which seems to be pretty typical. And if someone were to have an infection or an illness or something going on, that's typically when we see respiratory rate rise. And at this point, this individual may rise to over 20 breaths per minute on average before we're really concerned. We do see a lot of times people respiratory rate, they'll jump to above 20 breaths per minute, maybe for 10-20 minutes, and that's normal because you imagine if you're up and moving around, then your respiratory rate is just going to be higher because you're exerting yourself. It's really resting respiratory rate that matters. Panning over, we can see sleep as well. Again, this person's sleep is kind of all over the place, which is probably a topic that should be discussed. And then we can see alerts, the bed exit trends, secondary presence, and these can be looked at for a variety of different things. We're going to pop over next to the alert section in the middle. So if I click on that, we're going to go to the alerts. On the top, there's the caution alerts. So these are red, higher. We don't have any active alerts, but we could view details if there were any, and then we can see the historical ones. Popping down to attention, again, we don't have any active alerts, but we can see all the historical ones. We're going to go to config next, which is the section that's going to determine what is caution and attention. So coming over to config, so we can look at respiratory rate first. And here we have a sliding bar. So we determine normal as 14 and 28 breaths per minute. What we're looking for is over time whether or not someone's respiratory rate stays high or stays low. So these numbers are set for really low for 5 minutes and 10 minutes, and typically we'd want to change that value to a much higher value, to something like 1 hour or 2 hours is typically what we see. Of course, consult with your provider. We're not able to provide any medical advice, but again, we want to see respiratory rates stay high or stay low for these. So we can look at and set both attention and caution values for high respiration alerts and for low respiration alerts, and those values are actually set here in the normal respiration range tab. Going back to here, so we can see visit tracker. Here we can say if maybe the individual is in a facility, an assisted living facility, and in the care plan it states that they should be getting visited every 2 hours. If that doesn't happen, then we can get alerted upon that. Going over to bed exits, this is the big one. For bed exits, we start by setting a bedtime, essentially. So we're saying between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. I want bed exit alerts on. Between those times, if the individual is out of bed for at least 10 minutes, that's when I want to get an alert. So typically we want to look for a few days and see what someone's normal is. And typically we don't see people out of bed for a long time. It's typically 5 minutes. They get out of the bed to use the restroom, and they're back within a few minutes. And if they're gone for longer than that overnight, that's when we start to get worried. And then this last one here is just in the individual info, any name, date, and the serial number. Okay, popping over to the settings page now, so we can change our time zone, and we're going to go to manage care circle here next. So just brief description of care circles. Typically one individual will have a care circle. So if it's for example, my dad that I'm worried about, I'm going to define the care circle as myself and potentially a couple of my siblings, and we're really the circle that's providing him care, that's checking in on him. It could also be a neighbor, it could be a cousin, it could be a spouse. In the invitation section, so manage user invitations, this is where I can invite, for example, my siblings to also monitor. I can pop in here and add another email address and invite the member. That'll send them an email invite link, where they'll be able to join and get access here. We can also pop down and see all the sent invitations, who's accepted, who's still pending, and who's been revoked. Popping over to the permissions page, we can see everyone in here. We can define different permissions. For example, if we only want someone viewing the information, but we don't want people changing the thresholds or adding other people, this is where we can define those permissions. So for Connor Miller here, we see that in the org, he's a viewer, so he can view the data, he can't make changes to the thresholds, and he can't add other people. If I did want to change that, I could hit edit permissions here and bring me down and let him change it and become either an admin, where he'd be able to make all the changes, or an owner, where he would have all access to it. Then finally, we can decide who he has access for, any of these individuals. Then we can save the changes, or we can remove completely from the care circle. Going back to the settings page, the last one is the text center. So this is where we can add phone numbers to get those text alerts. We see here again, Connor Miller. What happens is when we add a phone number, we go in, put the name and the phone number, and it sends in an opt-in message. They legally have to reply start for opt-in so we don't break any consumer protection laws. And once they successfully reply start and are opted in, that's when this will be green and they'll be actually receiving the notifications. Once we have them added, we can go into patient selection and select a phone number, and then actually configure who and select who we want them to get notifications for. So this gives a lot of flexibility on maybe you have 2 or 3 people in your care circle. Maybe it's your parent and an aunt or an uncle as well, and the family's kind of keeping an eye on both of them, but you want some people getting notifications for your dad and some people for your uncle. This is where you can really customize these things. The final page is going to be alert types. So again, if we go into the phone number here, this is where we can more granularly define whether people are getting respiration alerts, all the different ones, as well as BEDX alerts and device connection, and visit tracker. So in the instance where, for example, your loved one is not in a facility and they're not having someone coming in and checking on them every 2 hours, you can just turn these alerts off. Okay, so that concludes the demo. If anyone has any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, my name is Kyle. My email address is kyle@coconihealth.com. And I look forward to hearing from people. Thank you.